program is brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?
Good evening and a very warm welcome to First Issues. Last week, we presented key highlights from First National Bank of Botswana's financial results announcement for the 6 months ended December 2018. We present conversations from the results for a number of reasons. 1, to give insights into the winning strategies implemented by a market leader and therefore instruct entrepreneurs. 2, to inform both current and potential shareholders as to the performance and direction of the company. And 3, to get an estimation as to how consumers and industry are faring, as banking results often give a reflection of, and much, much more. We do acknowledge that these conversations can be somewhat difficult for our viewers to follow, what with terms and concepts the likes of balance sheets, cost-to-income ratio, and more casually thrown around. To address this, as well as add some necessary skills to our viewers' financial management repertoire, we speak to investment analyst at Khori Capital, Kwabena Antwi. What are the must-know terms when it comes to understanding financials and annual reports?
So the key thing is income statement. And so in the income statement, you need to know, revenue. You need to know the net profit, right? So net profit is basically what the company earned for that period. And then the next thing you need to know is also their balance sheet. So that will show the financial position of the company at a certain time. So the income statement is for a period, but the balance sheet is at a certain time. And you look at it to see if there's any financial stress. And then the next thing you'd move on to would be cash flows. Cash flows show that how much cash goes in and out. So income statement is a bit, there are non-cash items in there. But if you really want to know, did money come into this business or flow out of the business, you look at the cash flow statement and that'll show you how they spend their money. So if it's correct, it should be a gain in cash. But that obviously has caveats. So sometimes they're growing, so they spend more than they actually get. But in general, you should be comfortable with where their cash flow is. Yeah.
How important is it really for somebody to have the skills to fully understand a financial or an annual report for the average person?
When you're looking at these companies, you're just looking about, are you comfortable with them? So the financials will just show, where they are, what are they earning, who's providing the money, and what are the terms of that. So and the annual report, there are other sections that talk of why things happen. So if earnings have come down or if they're in a negative cash position, they'll talk of why that is. And then they'll talk of the future. And then they'll maybe talk of where they've come from. So I think in the annual report as a total document, they really do explain why a company is in a certain position and what management feels the future will look like. So you just need to say, do I believe in this story? And do the financial statements actually talk to what they're saying? If there's a disconnect, that's when you should sort of go deeper and understand. And if still is a disconnect, then you should not be investing in that sort of company.
In terms of going deeper, I understand now this goes beyond just understanding revenue and cash flow. There must be some kind of analysis, even the most basic analysis that the layperson at home can perform. What are some of the things that you, as an analyst, look for when reading through financials and annual reports?
The key thing is there's certain ratios, all right? So you take certain figures in the financial statements and they tell you something. So one of them is your return on equity. So that means as an equity holder, what profit was generated from this. So for example, was it 2%? Or was it 3%? Or was it 4%? So why this helps is that one company can be earning 60 million pula, another company can be earning 6 million pula. Just because one earns higher in nominal terms doesn't mean they're actually a better company. So you look at how are they actually generating more earnings. You might find that the 6 million pula company that generates 6 million pula is actually generating higher earnings as a percentage of their equity. So the reason you have these sort of ratios is, one, you can compare it across companies irrespective of size, and two, you can also compare it, to that same company, like it's based on its history. So that's what we first look at: return on equity. What did you get there? I'm obviously making this assumption that you're going to be an equity investor, of course. The next thing you look for is your growth ratios. So just on the income statement, our revenue's growing. If revenues grew by 10%, what did expenses grow by? If expenses came down, why was that? So you just understand where's the growth in the key figures and why is this? What is influencing that? What is driving that? And then the last one is, if you're investing in a listed company, you're buying a share, right? So what you need to understand is there's the earnings of like the company, which is 60 million, and then there's earnings that you get as a shareholder, basically, because maybe they have 60 million, maybe they have 60 million shares, so a shareholder has earned 1 pula per share. That's sort of the thought process. So now, obviously, you're now saying, how much did you pay? Are you going to pay for this? So there's a ratio called price to earnings. Because you may find that there's a company where the earnings per share is 1 pula, but you're paying 20 pula for it. So this is, it speaks to where you feel the company is going. So if you're paying a high price to earnings ratio, you're trying to say that this company is really going to grow. If you're paying a low price to earnings ratio, what you're basically saying is this company is basically where it'll be for the next 5 years. So it should be I shouldn't pay for something that I already know that it's just going to grow 5% every year. So that's what we would look at. So if it's cheap, if you think this company is going to really grow, but the price to earnings ratio looks low, that's something that would twist your hand to get it. If you see that it's got a good return on equity, that's also good. And if you see that actually its revenues growth is exceeding its expenses growth, that's also a good thing, because that means you're actually going to make more profit from that company.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world, because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
What are some of the resources that the layperson watching at home can utilize to better inform themselves and educate themselves on financial terms and this type of knowledge?
Let me just start at the easiest one, is the annual report. So what you find is a company, if it's listed, already deals with investors and analysts like myself. So that information, they already talk to it in there. They might even calculate it for you. That's the first. So the annual report will have all the financial statement data that you can use. So if you have access to an Excel spreadsheet, you can just sort of put that down for each year and analyze it. The second source would be our stockbrokers. So you see their research reports. So someone will go and say, look, I've done a research report on, for example, the Cephalana, and this is what I found. And they might even say, you know what, this is the value I think this company's worth. As a third party, obviously that shouldn't influence you, but at least it talks to some of the things that they are looking at and what they think is driving growth. So you can think, well, is that what's driving growth to be? Maybe I don't agree, maybe I do. So that's another resource. And then another thing would be your news. There are things that you can see that, people speak of things that are happening in the companies and so on and so forth. So that influences the information or your outlook on that company. So I'll say the three sources are definitely the annual report, it's stockbrokers as well, and it's also your media. That will be your main three sources.
These, of course, are the things that are readily and freely available to somebody who's really looking to educate themselves. What of the person who's maybe looking to diversify their portfolio and maybe invest in shares and they're not too familiar with them, or any other type of investment platform? Are there resources, free or not, that are also available to them?
With the internet, it's made resources available. So you can literally just Google investing for beginners, and you'll get sort of an outline of what is there. Another thing is you can speak to stockbrokers. You can ask them what they feel, what do they look at, say that, look, I'm a first-time investor, I just want to understand what people look for and all of that. And you can actually just ask your investment managers if you want as well. You can just maybe say, look, at a results presentation and on an AGM, or if you bump into them, just ask. That information it's people want people to be more financially literate, because we all want people to actually invest their money in equities and things that are listed, so that at least they can grow their own wealth. Another thing, and obviously, you can educate yourself. You can go in, you can get a diploma or a short course, 6 weeks, just to understand what's financial modeling, what is financial statement analysis, and that is actually very good, because it gives you, because what you need is a skill. You don't necessarily need a qualification. You just need to understand it for yourself.
At which level do I invest in? Do I engage someone of your professional caliber?
So generally, with us, we'll have products out there that will deal with a certain objective. So here at Kore, we have unit trusts. So we have money market unit trust, and we have a global balance unit trust. So what does that mean? If I have 100 pula, it's literally like buying one share only. It doesn't really give you that diversification. And also, you don't want to put all of that money in one stock. So what you do is, through unit trust, it allows you to actually buy into a diversified pool of stocks. So that's how you would get the professional services of an investment manager. But that's not to say that, look, you can also go and build your own portfolio, but then that one takes time. It means you need to read all those reports. You need to have a forecast of where these companies are going. And if that's not your job, it can be quite a daunting task. So I think the best way would be through unit trusts, and then that allows you to get a more diversified pool of assets that's backing your investment.
Next week on First Issues, we talk brand management with international media and fashion icon Bonang Mateba.
Tabloids happen and they only last a week. But what lasts is the human being behind the tabloid, and what happens to the human being behind the tabloid.
Welcome back to First Issues. You may have seen our next guest, Umesh Loona's face, on one of his increasingly frequent inspirational notices that have been placed along the Western Bypass. Your eye may also have been drawn to his company, Apex Properties premises, under a huge sign screaming, "We sell fat cakes," while driving past. In this segment of the program, we get some brief insight into the man behind the brand and the growing property giant from Umesh himself, courtesy of a talk he recently gave at an entrepreneurial workshop. We are curious to hear what your thoughts are on his ideas through our various social media platforms, where we will upload this episode along with all our others.
I am 41, came to Botswana 99. My first degree is in accounting. But when you're young, we don't know ourselves. We still discover. But what changed my life when I came across a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And when Rich Dad said, why work for somebody when you can work for yourself, so that your next generation don't go through what you went through. So that was, I think, my turning point, that I need to build a business which I can pass it to my next generation. And I could not think of a business which I can pass it to next generation, because my biggest problem when I was growing up, I never really liked school. I used to hate school. My father is a lawyer, my uncle is a lawyer, other uncle is a doctor, other one accountant, other one computer engineer. They all studied too much, and I used to hate school. So my father said, become a lawyer, it means I have to go to school. The other one said, become a doctor, it means school. I didn't like school. So I had this problem, I don't like school, and I cannot build a business which my kids also have to go to school. I need to do something simple so that when I give them something, whether they go to school or not, they can still do that business. So that's when property talked to me. I said, this one, man, doesn't matter. This business is of technology, they might not be there in 5 years, but property will always be needed. So I think that was my reason. And the other reason was our banks, the financial industry. If you want a loan, they will give you a loan for a car very easy, but only for one. But any loan you ask them, they want to have a collateral, which is property. I was stuck, man. How do you start? Because when you look for investors, those are sharks. They eat your equity. They eat you. I hated that concept of giving somebody, your money and you don't know what will happen. I said, no, I have to look for business model where, I'm aligned to the banking system. So that's what the book Rich Dad Poor taught me. Then, I started learning how to use people's money to make money. And that's when the banks come in. I studied can I borrow from bank. And when you start a business, it's not about starting a business. Doesn't matter what business you start, you need to chase growth. So, I follow principle of life from principle of energy, that if you're not growing, you're shrinking. So it means if you start a business, every year you must grow. Because if you don't grow, you're going to be shrinking. And for you to grow, whether you make profit or loss, you need money to grow. It means you need to raise money every year. It means your business model has to be aligned to be able to bring in capital every year. And I was afraid of that. So I had to, study something which will beat all these equations, and property was my answer. I think because banks love property, and it's easy to release your growth in the property from the banking system again. So you can bring in growth capital, if not every year, every second, every third year, depending on your economic cycles. So that was my motivation of going into property. And then using technology, it helped me because it's easy to market your property, it's easy to shorten your customer experience, you can do more. Because we are all chasing time, it can bring more efficiency. So I think I use property to put money back into brick and mortar, because I don't trust this digital currency, because banks in Botswana still don't buy. Yes, maybe in America, these billionaires understand how to value these assets, but I think I have not met anybody in Botswana who can tell you how to value this data. So I still fear this digital currency or digital data valuations, because I haven't met somebody here in this market who can help me to understand that. So I think, for me, I think it's aligning your business model with the banking system, because that's what you need every time. And bringing solutions which market will need, because economic dynamics keep changing, because we have a very limited population of 2 million. Out of that, plus minus only 400,000 banks. And they are already heavily in debt. The debt on consumer in Botswana is almost 50 billion. Each one of us is owing 12.5 million. So you have very limited domain to play with. So I think you need to understand the market dynamics, so that when you bring a solution, there's a demand for that solution and you can scale up. But technology is one thing which can help you to scale easily, penetrate the market easily, or you don't even need to develop. You just leverage on somebody else's platform. There's already a customer base. Just find a solution which is people can buy or somebody else can buy, but obviously banks need to endorse that for you to raise that equity.
Next week, we hear from another entrepreneur, the growing international powerhouse that is South Africa's Bonang Matheba. But for now, we head to our Own Your Day, Own Your Life productivity segment with Professor Kiran Bhagat.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world. Because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Welcome back for more health and productivity tips in our Own Your Day, Own Your Life segment. We live in a culture that celebrates the pursuit of material wealth, sometimes at the cost of our health. Newer generations express this pursuit with their hashtag Team5am and All Hustle No Sleep hashtags on social media. But the experts say there is a price to pay. Professor Bhagat explains why both quality and length of sleep are very important health factors.
There are different phases of sleep, phase 1 to phase 4. And as one gets into sleep, the moment you get into bed, you go through phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in very simple terms, not to get too complicated, it's a deeper and deeper sleep. You get to a stage where you eventually go into what's called REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, where the eyes are closed, but we can actually see the eyes flitting around because you're dreaming. And it's that stage where you are in such deep sleep that the brain actually paralyzes the body. It sends a message that you cannot move your hands and your legs because otherwise you'd act out your sleep. You can imagine if you are dreaming about a lion chasing you, you'd actually get out of bed and move your arms and run around the room. So the brain actually switches off the spinal cord. It's a very fascinating process where you cannot move. It's the reason why some people who feel they've been abducted by aliens and they've been paralyzed and the aliens are dissecting them. The reason why they're having all these fantastic phantasmagorical dreams, if you like, is that they cannot move. They're dreaming and they know that they're dreaming and they're trying to get out of their bed, but they can't get out of their bed. And the reason is the body is paralyzed by the brain. So those are different stages. You go through such deep sleep, so that actually it's almost like you're comatose. We can measure the brainwave pattern of a patient who is literally comatose in a hospital. And that EEG or electroencephalographic pattern is almost similar to the deepest sleep that you have. So sleep almost is close to death in terms of the depth of sleep. And we need to go through all those 4 phases of sleep in order to have a refreshing night's sleep.
Next week on First Issues, we talk brand management with international media and fashion icon Bonang Matheba.
Tabloids happen and they only last a week. But what lasts is the human being behind the tabloid and what happens to the human being behind the tabloid.
This program was brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?